The first thing you notice when you're unexpectedly submerged in your own backyard, inside a bright yellow, slightly rusty, one-person research submersible named the Plucky Squid, is the silence. Not a peaceful, meditative silence, mind you. It's the kind of silence that screams, "You, Michael Peterson, are in a significant amount of trouble, quite possibly of your own making, but mostly because of Brenda Periwinkle." Then you notice the smell. It's a unique cocktail of old coffee, mild panic, that's me, and the faint, lingering aroma of what the University Marine Biology Department had described as disgruntled squid. I'd gotten a discount for that. Now, with murky water pressing in on the acrylic dome, my tools floating past like ghostly aquatic life in my flooded workshop, I'm starting to think no discount was steep enough. My heart's hammering a rhythm against my ribs that would make a woodpecker jealous. Okay, Mike," I whisper, the sound loud in the cramped confines. "Don't panic. You're in a submarine, in your flooded workshop. This is fine. This is totally, utterly, catastrophically fine." Who was I kidding? This was the opposite of fine. This was Brenda's masterpiece. It all started with a dream. A simple dream, really. I just wanted a backyard that didn't look like a forgotten patch of lunar landscape. You know, a little water, some rocks, maybe a fish or two, my little slice of suburban paradise in sensible Columbus, Ohio. What I got was an epic battle of wills with a woman whose superpower was finding fault with oxygen. I'm not a complicated guy. I'm Mike Peterson, 42. I sell accounting software, which is about as exciting as it sounds. And my real passion is projects. Big ones. The kind that make you stand back, covered in dirt and sweat, and say, "Yeah, I built that." My latest project, the one currently threatening to turn my entire property into a federal wetland, began as a modest koi pond. But you know how it is. Scope creep is a powerful beast. One minute you're thinking charming water feature, the next you're sketching out a multi-level, biofiltered, waterfall-equipped aquatic ecosystem complete with a dedicated bog zone and a reservoir the size of a small car. It wasn't going to be a pond. It was going to be an experience. My aquatic paradise, I'd started calling it in my head, mostly to annoy Brenda if she could hear my thoughts, which, given her uncanny ability to know when I was about to use a power tool after 8 p.m., I suspected she could. And then there was Brenda Periwinkle. Every neighborhood has one. Ours just happened to be weaponized with a clipboard, a perpetually pursed set of lips, and an encyclopedic knowledge of the Homeowners Association covenants, conditions, and restrictions that she probably co-authored in a fever dream. She was, in her own mind, the last bastion of suburban order against the creeping tide of, well, me, apparently. I remember our first significant encounter. I was unloading a pallet of rather handsome river stones. Brenda appeared, as if summoned by the clatter of rock on rock, her signature visor pulled low, her gardening gloves suspiciously pristine. "Michael," she'd said, her voice carrying the clipped authority of a drill sergeant inspecting a particularly untidy barracks. "Are those stones up to the approved neighborhood aesthetic guidelines? Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 3? I'd blinked. "They're rocks, Brenda. From a river. Pretty sure they predate the HOA by a few million years." She tapped her pen against her clipboard, a rhythmic tick that echoed the tightening in my chest. "That's not what the binder says. And is that rebar I see? I trust you have the appropriate permits for subterranean reinforcement of non-compliant decorative geological features?" That was Brenda. She didn't just see a guy trying to make his yard look nice. She saw a rogue agent, a purveyor of unpermitted chaos, a direct threat to the carefully curated beigeness of our cul-de-sac. It wasn't just the pond. Oh no, there was the great gnome uprising of 22, where my collection of perfectly charming garden gnomes, sourced, I might add, from a very reputable gnome monger in Germany, were deemed unregulation height and emotionally unsettling to passers-by. Then came the mailbox melodrama, where the shade of blue I'd painted it was apparently 2 Pantone shades off from approved sky hue. Don't even get me started on the bird feeder incident. Attracting non-native avian species was the official charge on that one. Each skirmish usually involved me trying to be polite, reasonable Mike, and Brenda escalating with the grim determination of a chess grandmaster who's just spotted a fatal flaw in her opponent's defense. For the aquatic paradise, I knew I needed backup. My enthusiasm, while boundless, didn't quite extend to excavating several tons of earth with a garden spade. So I hired contractors. Dave and Gary, salt-of-the-earth guys, strong as oxen, and blessed with a healthy sense of amused detachment regarding Brenda. Dave, wiping sweat from his brow as he surveyed my ambitious chalk outlines, had grinned. "So, your HOA cool with this, Mike? Looks like you're building a retirement home for Shamu here." "Let's just say Brenda's on a strict need-to-know basis, Dave," I'd replied. "And right now she doesn't need to know the full extent of my genius. Or the cubic yardage." Brenda's scrutiny intensified with every rumble of Dave's mini-excavator. She was a permanent fixture at her kitchen window, occasionally venturing out to the property line with a tape measure, a spirit level, and once, I swear, a pair of binoculars. She was taking photos, building a dossier. I imagined her late at night, illuminated by the glow of a computer screen, meticulously cataloging my transgressions in a PowerPoint presentation titled "Peterson, a Clear and Present Danger to Property Values." The spillway valve was a critical component. I'd explained it to Dave and Gary in painstaking detail. "See this big red handle, guys?" I'd said, pointing to the robust-looking valve connected to the overflow pipe leading to the storm drain. "This little beauty is crucial. It controls the overflow from the main reservoir. If it's closed when the pumps are on full tilt, well, let's just say the ducks will need scuba gear." A little foreshadowing I hadn't realized was quite so literal. There was a minor incident where Brenda tried to shut down the work, waving a copy of noise ordinances from 1978 that apparently forbade joyful whistling before 9 a.m. Dave, bless his straightforward heart, had just looked at her, then at his watch, then back at her and said, "Ma'am, it's 10:30, and I ain't whistled since my dog ran off in 97. Brenda had retreated, fuming, her clipboard practically vibrating with indignation. That, I suspect, was a turning point for her. She wasn't just going to observe anymore. She was going to act. Okay, so there's one more piece to this puzzle, and it's a weird one. Even I know it's weird. But a man's gotta have hobbies, right? Some guys golf, some guys collect stamps. I own a submarine. Not a nuclear sub, mind you. It's a one-person research submersible, about the size of a large bathtub with a very optimistic bubble on top. I bought it surplus from a marine biology university a few years back. They said it was slightly haunted by the ghost of a disgruntled squid. I got a discount. I named her the Plucky Squid. I keep her in my oversized garage/workshop, which is probably another HOA violation I haven't been dinged for yet. I tinker with her on weekends, polishing her bright yellow hull, checking her batteries, dreaming of the day I'd take her out to explore the murky depths of Alum Creek Lake. It was my someday project, my escape pod from the mundane. I'd never actually used her for a serious dive. The deepest she'd been was the bottom of a large inflatable kiddie pool I'd borrowed from my nephew to test her ballast tanks. It had been underwhelming, but promising. No one really knew about the Plucky Squid, not Dave and Gary, definitely not Brenda. "One day, old girl," I'd murmur, buffing her acrylic dome to a shine. "We'll see the world, or at least the bottom of Miller's Pond. I had no idea her maiden voyage would be quite so domestic, or so involuntary. It's Saturday morning. The sun's shining. Birds are singing. It's the kind of day that lull you into a false sense of security. The contractors are off, probably enjoying a well-deserved break from Brenda's eagle eye. I'm out in the backyard, putting the final touches on the aquatic paradise. The reservoir is full. The waterfalls are gurgling merrily on a low-pump test cycle, and the bog filter is looking suitably boggy. I'm in my waders, standing in the shallow end of what is now a very large, very impressive, and, if I'm honest, slightly intimidating pond system. "Almost there, Horatio," I say to the ceramic frog spitter I'd artfully placed among the new ferns. He just stares back, eternally optimistic. Just a few more adjustments to the pump intake, and then I unleash the aquatic symphony. I can see Brenda. She's lurking near the property line, a shadowy figure partially obscured by the ornamental grasses I'd planted. Another point of contention. Invasive, non-native aesthetic disruptors, she'd called them. She's making notes on her ever-present clipboard. I give her a cheerful, deliberately oblivious wave. She doesn't wave back, just scowls. That glint in her eye isn't admiration for my landscaping, I realize too late. It's the glint of impending doom, my doom specifically. I'm bent over, fiddling with a stubborn valve near the main pump when I hear it, a faint, rhythmic squeaking sound, like a rusty gate hinge or a large, seldom-used valve being turned by determined, indignant hands. "What in the—" I mutter, straightening up. I look towards the spillway area, the one that leads out to the street storm drain. It's slightly obscured by a dense planting of dwarf conifers, my attempt at a visual barrier, as per another of Brenda's lengthy complaints about the industrial unsightliness of my overflow system. And there she is, Brenda. She's at the external spillway control valve, the big red one. The one I'd specifically told Dave and Gary was the emergency release, the fail-safe, the "for the love of God, never close this when the pumps are on" valve. She's turning it, closing it. A cold dread washes over me. "Brenda!" I shout, my voice cracking. "Hey, Brenda, what are you doing? Stop!" She doesn't even flinch, doesn't look at me. Her voice, when it comes, is tight with that uniquely terrifying brand of misplaced righteousness only a true HOA Karen can muster. This unpermitted aquatic monstrosity is a violation of Bylaw 7, subsection C, regarding unauthorized alteration of property drainage patterns. I'm mitigating the hazard. "Mitigating?" I yell, scrambling out of the shallow end, waders sloshing. "You're going to flood the county. That's the main release valve, you lunatic. You're going to turn my backyard into a water hazard on a PGA course." The water. Oh God, the water. It's like a cartoon, but not funny. Not even a little bit. With the spillway now firmly shut by Brenda's iron will, and the main pumps still circulating what must be thousands of gallons from the reservoir, there's nowhere for the excess to go. The level in the main pond, the one that's basically a small lake now, starts to rise. Quickly. Visibly. No, come on! I'm at the pump control panel, a weatherproof box on a post. My hands are shaking. I slam the kill switch for the main circulation pumps. They groan to a halt. But there's a secondary, smaller solar pump for the bog filter I'd completely forgotten about, and it's still chugging away, blissfully unaware of the impending crisis. Or maybe it's just the sheer head pressure in the system now, with no outlet. The water in the reservoir, the one dangerously close to my workshop, continues its relentless climb. The workshop door. I'd left it slightly ajar to air the place out. Water is now lapping at the threshold, dark, greedy tongues of it, licking at the concrete. My workshop, my tools, oh no, My sub! The plucky squid. It was the stupidest idea I'd ever had. I'd later tell Officer Ramirez, and he'd just nod, like, yeah, that tracks. And considering I once tried to build a trebuchet to launch water balloons into my other neighbor's, the cool one, not Brenda, hot tub, that's saying something. Water is pouring into the workshop now, swirling around the legs of my workbench, snatching at loose pieces of lumber. The plucky squid is on blocks, her bright yellow hull looking almost cheerful in the dim light. But the water is rising around her, like an incoming tide. I splash into the workshop, the cold water shocking against my waders. I can't open the main spillway from here. Brenda has her death grip on the external valve. My phone. It's in my pocket, probably taking its last, gurgling breath. I look at the sub. I look at the rising water, now up to my knees. A moment of insane, desperate calculation flickers through my brain. It's a terrible idea. A truly, monumentally stupid idea. But it's the only idea. Well, old girl, I say, slapping the plucky squid's flank. Looks like your maiden voyage is going to be a little unconventional, and a lot sooner than planned. I scramble for the main hatch. It's stiff. It hasn't been opened in months. Panic lends a frantic strength to my arms. The water is chest high now inside the workshop. My prized router bits are probably doing the backstroke. Finally, with a groan of protesting metal, the hatch pops open. I practically fall inside, water cascading in with me. I slam it shut, spin the locking wheel, and engage the seals, just as the murky brown water outside the main viewport completely covers it. And just like that, my Saturday morning went from minor landscaping adjustments to unscheduled submarine adventure in my own backyard. Brenda was really outdoing herself. This wasn't just a complaint. This was performance art. The silence inside the plucky squid is absolute, now that the roar of the invading water is shut out. It's just my own ragged breathing, amplified in the tiny space, and the occasional ominous creak from the hull as it settles in its new, unwelcome aquatic environment. The view out the main port is a brown, murky nothingness, occasionally punctuated by the ghostly silhouette of a floating paint can or a sadly drowned power drill. My heart is doing a solo drum performance that would make Animal from the Muppets proud. Okay, Mike, I pant, wiping condensation from the inside of the viewport. Breathe. You're in a submarine. It's designed for this. Sort of. Not this specifically, but water. It's good with water. I fumble for the internal lights. They flicker on, casting a dim, greenish glow over the cramped interior. It smells, as I mentioned, faintly of old coffee, my current terror, and that ever-present ode to disgruntled squid. The plucky squid isn't exactly a luxury liner. It's more of a submersible coffin built for one optimistic idiot, namely me, the seals. I run my hands around the main hatch seal. Dry, thank God, for now. I try the radio, a crackly old VHF unit I'd picked up at a ham radio swap meet. Static. Glorious, unhelpful static. My phone, I confirm with a soggy pat to my pocket, is now an expensive paperweight. The workshop is clearly a lost cause. The water level outside, judging by the pressure on the hull and the increasingly distorted view, is still rising. The only way out is, well, out. And hopefully, up. Before Brenda somehow manages to drain the Pacific Ocean into my geraniums. Ballast controls. I remember the ballast controls. I'd tested them once in that oversized kiddie pool I'd borrowed from my nephew. He was not amused when I told him his rubber ducky now had a cruising depth. The controls are simple enough, a couple of chunky levers and a pressure gauge that currently reads anxious. Okay, easy does it, Squidly, I murmur to the inanimate vessel, as if coaxing a nervous pony. Blow the tanks. Gently now. Don't want to shoot out of here like a champagne cork at a particularly rowdy wedding. I pull the lever marked Blow Main Ballast. There's a hiss of compressed air, a deep groan from the bowels of the sub, and then a distinct lurch. We're moving, upwards, very, very slowly. The view outside the port changes. The blurry shapes of my workshop tools give way to— are those my prize-winning hostas? Oh, the humanity. Then more distorted green and brown. I must be in the main pond area now, which, thanks to Brenda's mitigation efforts, has become a surprisingly large and rather opaque lake. Is that Horatio? I squint at a blurry shape that might be my ceramic frog spitter, now submerged like a tiny green Atlantis. Sorry, buddy. Didn't mean to torpedo your Zen garden. Blame the lady with the clipboard. And then a shimmering, diffused light from above. The surface. Hope, as they say, floats, or in this case, is about to. The plucky squid, true to her name, breaks the surface of my massively expanded water feature with a surprisingly gentle whoosh. It's like a bright yellow, slightly rusty, and very confused bath toy bobbing in the middle of a suburban disaster zone. I'm maybe 30 feet from my back patio, which is now prime waterfront real estate. My award-winning rose bushes are completely submerged, their thorny arms probably waving in surrender. I wrestle with the hatch again, my hands trembling. It pops open with a gasp of stale air, and I stick my head out, gulping in the sweet, sweet oxygen of freedom. The first thing I see? Brenda. She's standing at the edge of the newly formed Lake Peterson, her clipboard still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Her mouth is agape. Her visor is askew. For the first time since I've known her, Brenda Periwinkle is utterly, magnificently speechless. It's a beautiful sight. Almost worth the property damage. Then I hear sirens, lots of them getting closer. Turns out, a homemade lake suddenly appearing in a suburban backyard, complete with its own fully surfaced, occupied submarine, tends to attract a bit of attention. Who knew? 2 police cruisers are parked awkwardly on the street, their lights painting frantic red and blue strokes across the stunned faces of my neighbors, who are now peering over fences, phones out, no doubt live-streaming my aquatic adventure to the bewildered masses. Officer Miller, young, with a meticulously trimmed mustache that seems to be quivering with suppressed disbelief. And Officer Ramirez, older, world-weary, with the kind of eyes that have seen it all but are currently squinting like they might be hallucinating, approach the water's edge. Officer Miller raises a megaphone, even though I'm only about 30 feet away and bobbing gently. Sir, in the yellow vessel, are you all right? His voice echoes slightly across my new inland sea. I manage a weak wave from the plucky squid's hatch. Peachy, officer! Just, admiring the new beachfront property values. Thinking of putting in a marina. Officer Ramirez mutters something to Miller that sounds suspiciously like, did he say vessel or weasel? Then, louder to me. Sir, can you explain what exactly is going on here? And what that thing is? He gestures vaguely at the plucky squid with a pen. It's a long story, officers, I call back, trying to sound nonchalant, like emerging from a submarine in your flooded backyard is a perfectly normal Saturday morning activity. Involves an overzealous HOA representative, a critically important spillway valve, and a distinct lack of common sense that wasn't mine for once, I swear. Just then, Brenda, having apparently rebooted from her stunned silence, finds her voice, and what a voice it is. He's a menace, she shrieks, her voice hitting a pitch that probably shatters windows in the next county. This whole lagoon is unpermitted. It's a flagrant violation of Section 12 regarding unauthorized aquatic installations, and that thing probably violates FAA regulations. I sigh. It's a submarine, Brenda, not a blimp. It goes under the water, not over it. And you, My dear chairwoman of the committee for making my life miserable, caused this whole mess." The cops look from me, still half in, half out of my submarine, to a fuming, sputtering Brenda on the shore, then back at me. I can see the unspoken question in their eyes. Is this real life, or did we take a wrong turn at Albuquerque and end up in a very strange sitcom? The answer, I'm afraid, is yes. Getting out of a submarine that's beached itself on your former petunias while being interrogated by the police and heckled by the architect of your aquatic doom is an experience I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Okay, maybe on Brenda, just for a few minutes. The fire department has arrived now, sirens wailing, adding another layer of chaotic officialdom to the scene. They look genuinely perplexed. I can hear one of them say, "Dispatch said man in a boat." They didn't say man in a U-boat in his flower bed. They deploy an inflatable raft, the kind they use for swift water rescues, to extract me from the plucky squid, which is now listing slightly in about 3 feet of water that used to be my meticulously edged lawn. The whole operation is magnificent overkill and deeply embarrassing. "You okay there, Captain Nemo?" one of the firefighters asks, offering me a hand as I awkwardly clamber from the sub's hatch into the raft. He's got a grin he's not quite managing to hide. "Just a flesh wound," I say, trying for a brave smile. "Mostly my pride, and possibly my homeowner's insurance premiums." Once on dry land, which is to say, my soggy, waterlogged patio, the questioning continues with Officers Miller and Ramirez. Brenda hovers nearby, like a vulture with a particularly damning set of bylaws, interjecting at every opportunity. "So, Mr. Peterson," Officer Ramirez begins, his pen poised over his notepad. He has the weary air of a man who's heard every excuse in the book, but is about to hear a brand new chapter. "You're alleging that this lady, Miss Periwinkle," Brenda puffs up. "It's Chairwoman Periwinkle of the Neighborhood Beautification and Regulatory Adherence Committee," she corrects sharply. Officer Ramirez lets out a sigh that seems to carry the weight of years of dealing with petty tyrants. That Miss Chairwoman Periwinkle intentionally closed a critical drainage valve, thereby causing this extensive localized flooding? Intentionally, maliciously, and with a level of self-satisfied glee usually reserved for Bond villains who've just unveiled their doomsday device, I exclaim, pointing an accusing finger at Brenda. "Ask her. She was mitigating a hazard," she said. Brenda draws herself up to her full, unimposing height. I was upholding the community standards as clearly delineated in the CC&Rs, Article 7, Subsection C. He was creating an unlicensed, unapproved, and frankly unsightly waterway. It's a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and probably alligators. Officer Miller, who looks about 12, blinks. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we're in Columbus, Ohio. The nearest alligator is probably in the zoo. And this," he gestures to my submerged rose garden, "looks more like a goldfish pond that's had a really, really bad day." Just when I think the circus has enough clowns, Dave and Gary, my contractors, roll up in their pickup truck. They'd apparently heard about some kind of biblical flood situation at Mike's place from a frantic neighbor down the street. They stop dead in their tracks at the end of my driveway, their jaws practically unhinging as they take in the scene. The shimmering expanse of Lake Peterson, the bright yellow hull of the plucky squid resting jauntily amongst the hydrangeas, the flashing lights of multiple emergency vehicles, and me, looking like a drowned rat, arguing with a police officer and an irate garden gnome enthusiast. Dave is the first to speak, his voice filled with a kind of horrified awe. "Whoa, dude, you said you were going for an experience." "I didn't realize you meant the Poseidon Adventure, the Backyard Remix." Gary, eyes wide, points a trembling finger at my beached submersible. Is that Is that the sub you were telling us about, Mike? The one you said was haunted by a squid? The plucky squid in the flesh, or rather the fiberglass, I confirm, managing a weak grin. And apparently she's also amphibious now. And Brenda over there. I nod towards my nemesis, who is now attempting to explain the finer points of landscape drainage bylaws to a bewildered firefighter, is the sea witch who started it all. The cops now have more witnesses. Dave and Gary, after a moment of stunned silence, reluctantly corroborate my story about the crucial nature of the spillway valve and Brenda's previous, increasingly agitated interference with the project. Yeah, he told us that valve was super important, Dave says to Officer Ramirez, scratching his head. Said if it got closed with the pumps going, the ducks would need scuba gear. Guess he wasn't kidding. He looks at me, then at the plucky squid. A slow grin spreads across his face. Looks like you're the duck today, Mike. Thanks, Dave. Real helpful. While the Keystone cops try to sort out the legalities of submersible-based property disputes and HOA-initiated flash floods, I take a gander at the carnage. Officer Miller, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, trails after me for documentation purposes. My backyard is a complete wreck. The beautiful, multi-tiered aquatic paradise is now just a very large, very muddy hole filled with an alarming amount of water. The workshop is flooded to about waist height. My tools, my woodworking projects, years of accumulated stuff, all of it is either floating or submerged. My prize-winning peace roses are definitely goners. They look less like peace and more like surrender. The sheer volume of water is astounding. It's contained for now by the slight, natural slope of my yard, but I can see Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down peering nervously over her fence. Her prize-winning petunias are perilously close to the new waterfront. Gonna be a heck of an insurance claim, huh? Officer Miller observes, stating the catastrophically obvious. You think they have a checkbox for acts of HOA? I ask, rhetorically. Or damage incurred via unscheduled submarine deployment? Brenda is still over by the curb, arguing with Officer Ramirez, now brandishing a soggy, bedraggled copy of the HOA bylaws like a sacred text. See? She proclaims, her voice shrill. Article 9. No unapproved modification of grade or existing water table. He clearly modified the water table. It's practically oceanic out there. Officer Ramirez, to his credit, looks remarkably patient. Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm pretty sure this qualifies as a localized flash flood, not a modification of grade. And right now, you're the one looking at some potentially serious questions regarding reckless endangerment and possibly malicious destruction of property, Brenda sputters. For a glorious, fleeting moment, she seems genuinely taken aback. The righteous wind knocked out of her sails by the sudden, unwelcome threat of actual, legal consequences. The rest of the day is a blur of statements, phone calls to my equally bewildered insurance agent, a submarine, you say, in your garden? And the dawning, inescapable realization that I am now, and will forever be, submarine guy. My 15 minutes of fame had arrived, soggy, smelling faintly of pond scum and disgruntled squid, and being live tweeted by at least 3 of my neighbors. Kids are pointing in awe at the plucky squid. A local news van even shows up, drawn by the scanner chatter about a possible capsized vessel in a residential area. I give a bewildered, slightly punch-drunk interview from my patio. The plucky squid gleaming damply in the background like a bizarre, oversized garden ornament. So, Mr. Peterson, the impossibly perky reporter chirps, microphone thrust in my face, you're saying you escaped a heated dispute with your homeowners association in a personal submarine? I try for a roguish grin. It probably comes out looking more like a pained grimace. Well, when life gives you lemons, Sometimes you gotta find a submersible and wait for high tide. Or something like that. The main takeaway here, folks, is don't mess with another man's spillway valve. Seriously, it's just not neighborly. The contractors, Dave and Gary, are now local heroes in their own right, trying to figure out how to drain Lake Peterson safely without flooding the entire street. It's going to take days, a battery of industrial pumps, and probably a miracle. I feel a strange mix of incandescent fury at Brenda, bone-deep exhaustion, and an odd, almost giddy sense of accomplishment. I survived. My property values might be in the toilet, but I survived. And the plucky squid, bless her rusty squid-haunted hull, actually worked. She saved me. In the stupidest, most roundabout way possible, she saved me. I might just have to forgive her for the smell. The next few days were damp and loud. Turns out, dewatering a suburban lagoon that used to be your award-winning perennial garden takes an armada of industrial pumps, a surprising amount of electrical cord, and the kind of patience usually reserved for saints or people trying to assemble flat-pack furniture. Dave and Gary, now legendary figures in the neighborhood, were the guys who unflooded Lake Peterson, were practically Poseidon's personal plumbers, Dave had declared, worked tirelessly. The plucky squid, after much debate and a consultation with a guy who usually recovered submerged vehicles from actual lakes, was eventually craned out. She now sat forlornly on my driveway, covered in a tarpaulin, but not before becoming a local tourist attraction. Kids left drawings of her taped to my garage door, mostly featuring her battling sea monsters that looked suspiciously like Brenda. One even had her with laser eyes. I kind of liked that one. I spent most of my time on the phone with insurance adjusters. Their initial polite skepticism usually dissolved into stunned silence, followed by a hesitant, "Could you repeat the part about the HOA and the submarine? Again, sir?" I learned that there is, in fact, no standard insurance checkbox for acts of HOA leading to involuntary submarine deployment. They were going to have to create a new category. I suggested Brenda-related calamities. They didn't laugh. Brenda, meanwhile, was conspicuously absent. The rumor mill, which in our neighborhood churned faster than a high-speed blender, suggested she'd gone to stay with her sister in Poughkeepsie. Or perhaps she was consulting with a lawyer, or maybe she was just hiding from the sudden, unwelcome glare of local notoriety and the distinct possibility of facing actual legal repercussions for her Saturday morning landscaping critique. One could only hope. Officer Ramirez, bless his seen-it-all soul, stopped by a few days later, after the last of the industrial pumps had gurgled its final slurp, and my backyard resembled a particularly depressing mud wrestling arena. "Mr. Peterson," he said, accepting the lukewarm instant coffee I offered. He surveyed the muddy expanse with a professional air. "Got an update for you on the, periwinkle situation." I perked up. "Oh yeah? Are they naming a particularly aggressive strain of algae after her?" He almost cracked a smile. Almost. Not quite, but the district attorney's office is reviewing the situation with considerable interest, as they put it. Seems your little voyage brought a lot of other things to the surface, no pun intended. Other things? Turns out, Ramirez continued, taking a thoughtful sip of the terrible coffee, you weren't Miss Periwinkle's only disgruntled customer, so to speak. Once word got out that someone had finally, officially, rocked the boat, or, a surprising number of your neighbors came forward with their own tales of woe. Improperly measured hedges, unapproved paint swatches, the great wind chime purge of 2019. It's quite the list. So she might actually face some consequences for turning my backyard into a temporary habitat for migratory waterfowl? I asked, a spark of hope igniting. Looks like it, Ramirez confirmed. Malicious mischief, reckless endangerment, creating a public nuisance. The list is surprisingly long for someone whose primary weapon is a clipboard and a finely honed sense of outrage. The City Council is also taking a long, hard look into the HOA's broader powers and, shall we say, enforcement methodologies. Seems our Miss Periwinkle might have overplayed her hand one too many times. I felt a wave of something akin to vindication, quickly followed by an overwhelming sense of weariness. All this over some rocks and a bit of water. The following week, there was an emergency HOA meeting, or rather, what was supposed to be an HOA meeting but rapidly devolved into a public airing of grievances against the tyranny of Brenda. The community hall was packed. I hadn't planned on going. I'd had enough HOA-related drama to last several lifetimes. But then Dave, my contractor-turned-confidant, called. "You gotta see this, Mike. It's like the storming of the Bastille, but with more complaints about lawn ornaments." So I went. Brenda was there, looking somewhat diminished, her usual ironclad certainty slightly dented, but still defiant. She attempted to defend her actions, her voice trembling a little as she cited bylaws and the sacred duty to maintain community integrity and aesthetic harmony. And I maintained that Mr. Peterson's unauthorized and frankly hazardous aquatic development posed a clear and present danger to the neighborhood's ecological balance, she declared, thumping a, dry this time, copy of the CC&Rs. A voice from the back of the room, belonging to Mrs. Henderson, whose prize-winning petunias had been on the literal front line of Lake Peterson, cut through the air. "The only danger was you, Brenda, playing God with a wrench and nearly drowning Michael in his own water feature. My petunias haven't been the same since." Then the floodgates really opened. Mr. Abernathy from down the street recounted his battle over the unacceptable curvature of his driveway. Young Mrs. Rodriguez tearfully described Brenda's campaign against her children's excessively vibrant sidewalk chalk art. It was a pile-on of epic proportions. I just stood at the back, watching. It wasn't about me anymore, not really. It was about a neighborhood that had finally had enough. Brenda, for all her bluster, looked small. So, what happened next? Well, Brenda was eventually charged. She got a hefty fine, a stern lecture from a judge who clearly had his own HOA horror stories, and a significant number of community service hours. Ironically, and I suspect the judge had a wicked sense of humor, assigned to helping maintain the actual city park's water features and public gardens. She was also strongly encouraged by the HOA board, the actual elected one, not just her, to step down from all committees. Permanently. The reign of terror was over. Poughkeepsie, apparently, gained a permanent resident. My backyard is slowly recovering. Dave and Gary, now practically family, helped me redesign a smaller, city-approved, and thoroughly permitted pond. "No more delusions of aquatic grandeur for me," I told them, though I caught Dave winking at Gary. "The plucky squid still sits on my driveway under her tarp. I've had a couple of offers from quirky roadside museums and one rather eccentric billionaire who wants to display her in his private collection of unusual escape vehicles. I'm thinking about it. She deserves a good retirement home. Life got a lot quieter after that." My neighbors started waving again. Some even brought over casseroles in the immediate aftermath. "So sorry about your lake, Michael. The aquatic paradise is smaller now, more manageable. The fish are happy. Horatio the Frog Spitter has pride of place, gazing serenely over his now correctly drained domain. Just the other day I was at the hardware store, picking up some perfectly normal, non-nautical plumbing supplies. The kid at the checkout, the one with the nose ring and the bored expression, looked at my credit card, then up at me, his eyes widening slightly. "Hey," he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Aren't you submarine guy?" I couldn't help it. I grinned back. That's me, legend of the deep, cul-de-sac. He actually asked for my autograph on a paint stirrer. You know, sometimes I actually miss the chaos, just a little bit. But one thing's for damn sure. My new spillway valve now has about 7 different locks on it, a motion sensor, and a small, very discreet sign that reads, "Brenda, don't even think about it." And the plucky squid? Well, let's just say Alum Creek Lake looks mighty tempting next spring. After all, every squid, disgruntled or otherwise, deserves a proper adventure.